Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the John DeVito Show. Tonight, I was thinking a lot about the issues that we're having in society right now. Now, I'm not going to say just young people, but I would say that the vast majority of the serious problems at this point are with the younger population. And when I say the younger population, I mean the millennials, Gen Z, and I'm talking about all the problems we have with social emotional learning these days. So when I think about all of the problems that the young people are having today, it really makes me think about why these problems are existing. Has our society changed so much over the last 10 years compared to what we've lived through in previous generations? I mean, I think in a lot of ways, yes. I think the boom of technology and the boom of social media has certainly made it more difficult for every person to live, I think, in today's society, where literally your life is now under a microscope. And we are in this culture of literally sharing everything that we do during the course of our day to everybody in the world. And again, it's all dependent on, on Facebook, who you become friends with, or on Instagram or X, how many followers you have and things like that, and you can control those things. But it just seems like so much of our life now is faster, is just more consumed with technology, with information being thrown at us all the time. Now, when I was young, growing up in New Hampshire, we did not have the availabilities for all the information that you have today. I still remember doing homework when I was a young kid in New Hampshire. And, our Google was literally pulling out the set of encyclopedias. I think we had Encyclopedia Britannica, I believe, at my house. And if you needed to look something up and you couldn't figure it out when you were doing your homework, you had two choices: look it up in the encyclopedia or go ask your parents if they could help you with this particular subject you were having trouble with. Now, today, not only can you Google any answer that you need anytime that you need it, it's all of the other information that is available for everybody all the time. Now, to go to a little bit darker place, when I was a kid, again, you become a teenager and you are interested in the other sex, the same sex, whatever it is, you start getting interested in sex. And back in the day, if you were lucky, one of your friends' dads maybe had an old Playboy sitting around, and you could look at that and whatever, giggle with your buddies. Today, think of the different outlets and avenues young children have to view content and material that's free and completely inappropriate for the developmental age. And if you think about all of the things that are being thrown at young people today, now, not to mention we had the pandemic that happened. And literally after the pandemic, for someone like me, I see all these wars that are happening right now. I've been through this before. But if you're a young person, you went through the pandemic. And I remember one of my kids saying, literally, the Ukraine war was about to start right at the tail end of the pandemic. And I remember one of my kids saying, Jesus, don't we even get a chance to breathe and take a break before the next tragedy happens? And I think, in addition to children being able to view inappropriate content, they also receive so much news and is so much more aware of the news than we were back when I was a kid. I mean, if I was a kid, I guess you could read the newspaper, which I never did. Maybe I would read the sports page, look at the statistics and things like that for baseball or whatever else. But I mean, I didn't spend any time reading about world politics. And my parents would try to get me to sit down and watch the news sometimes. And that was like, paint drying in front of me. And I could barely pay attention to anything that, I was watching on the news. But if you look at today, all the different avenues, I mean, you have all these political videos on TikTok. You have all these social influencers that are trying to influence the younger generation in how to think, in how to act, into what gender maybe they should be. And there are so many things that are out there that are testing the young children of today like they've never been tested before. So when I think about the state of our country and the state of our children and the state of our families and the state of our society on a whole, it's very difficult not to think about how social media, the information that we all are fed to constantly, maybe this all has us a little bit on overload. If you think about it, I mean, we really only have so much room to process information, and we get so much information thrown at us, it makes it very difficult to process it and really hold on to all of it without going into overload. Now, when you look past the technology, now has the approach of parents become the problem? Now, I know that there are a lot of people out there today that don't believe in spanking, in any type of punishment in that manner. Now, I grew up in a generation where I was spanked, and unfortunately, sometimes I got more than spankings. And that's just the way it was in my family, and I think a lot of families were that same way back in the 70s, 80s, and most likely. So, again, when I was a kid, those type of punishments were pretty common. I think out of most of the people that I knew, my friends and other peers and things like that. So when you think about how children were disciplined back in the day, now I think of things like if I was out as a young child with my parents, my mother, my father, whoever, and if I went to a store and I asked for candy, and my mother looked back at me and said, "No, you're not going to have candy." If I threw a tantrum and started crying back in the day, I'm sure many people my age remember this phrase that was pretty common. "You better stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about." Could you imagine being out today in a store and hearing a mother say that? I mean, you'd be on the phone already with DCF looking to report her. But back in the, I assume the 50s and 60s, but when I was growing up, the 70s and 80s, this was a fairly common thing. And if you continued to throw a fit, your mother or father would legitimately give you something to cry about. So there's no doubt about that. Been there, done it. Unfortunately, I've seen it happen. And that was, one of the punishments that you received back when I was a kid. In school, you would never dare to disrespect a teacher, to disrespect the principal. I mean, if you swore in class, not only would you get some type of punishment at the school, whether it be detention, suspension, whatever it may be, just wait till you get home and you see your parents after you get the call home from the principal telling them that you dropped an F-bomb or something like that in school. You would have been dead at home. You would have gotten your ass whooped. You would have been in your room, and you would have been feeling the punishment for quite some time after something like that happened. Today, it's a completely different game in schools and at home. I mean, today, the kids at home, they know they can't be spanked. They know they're not going to be hit. And since the time they were little, we've almost been afraid to ever tell children no. We've been afraid to punish them in any way. It might hurt their self-esteem, their fragile self-esteem. And when you give them, we used to give them timeouts all the time. I mean, what did timeouts do? I don't think timeouts did anything to really punish kids and get them into an area where they were learning how to respect adults, respect authority, and also fear a little bit that if they did the wrong thing in school or did the wrong thing out in public, the word was going to get home to your parents and you were going to get your ass whooped. I mean, that is just the way it was then. But now we have gone overboard, I think, in coddling children. We have gone out of our way coddling kids and making sure that we are always thinking of their needs, thinking of their self-esteem, building them up. We can't do something that they might need to speak to a psychiatrist about 10 years in the future. I mean, it's just insane if you think about how much the world has changed in one generation. Now, on the surface, when you think about a society where the parents are not spanking their children, the parents are not yelling at their children, the parents are, in some cases, not instilling the fear of God in their children like we've seen in previous generations. On the surface, that sounds like it would be a positive move, right? A development, a move forward, a society that it is evolving into something better than it once was, right? But when you look at the end result, when you look back on my childhood, we knew that we went into school, we respected our teachers, we respected our principal, and if we did not do that, we would get our ass whooped. We knew going into a job, you were going to work hard. If you talked back to your boss, you were going to get fired, and then you'd have to go home and deal with your parents. If you were disrespectful in church, in CCD, in sports, out in society with your friends, in town, whatever, the word would get back and you would get your ass whooped. Now, was that the right way to do things? I don't know. But I do know that my generation and the generations that came before me were respectful generations that respected authority, respected adults, and were not causing so many of the problems that we're seeing in the schools right now. I mean, I don't know if people who haven't been all involved with schools in a long time realize how bad it is in some places, but we're talking about students who are dropping F-bombs regularly in class of teachers and not getting punished. We're hearing about students that are shoving teachers and getting physical with them and not really getting punished. And when a school calls home now to talk about how disrespectful little Johnny's been, then they're getting yelled at by the parents. They're getting threatened by lawsuits. And that's the society that we live in now. So the children have been protected so much by their parents. They've all grown up in little cocoons. Their parents have been bulldozing the way for them, steamrolling their path, and the children haven't had to face any adversity. So you've got this perfect storm of students that have grown up without learning how to be respectful. They haven't had the fear of God in them. They don't fear consequences, but in the same breath, they haven't been up against anything, and they really don't know how to dig their heels in when things get tough. So here we are in a society where people are struggling. Mental health right now is the worst I have ever seen it in my existence on this planet. People are struggling, and it's not just children. Children are struggling. Adults are struggling. We are struggling as a nation, and I guess the questions are, why is this happening? Why are people struggling to the extent right now that they never have in the past? Is it the society we're living in? We've been living in a very divided country. Ever since we've had the battles, Trump won the presidency. The Democrats were out to destroy him. They destroyed him. Then the Republicans have been out trying to destroy Biden, and they pretty much destroyed them. We've got a divided nation where nobody is getting along. And I think in general, because of all the different things we have in society, like DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, I don't despise all aspects of this. I don't want you to think that I'm a person that's bashing what that should really stand for, which is equality. I mean, we really need to have in the society a society where men and women are equal, where people, regardless of their color, are equal. And that's something that we do need. But this whole diversity, equity, and inclusion thing has been again stolen by the extremist radical left, just like they stole Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. It turned it into like a militant organization. That's what we're seeing now with DEI. And with DEI, we are now seeing blatant racism against white people, where white people are being excluded, where white people are being told that we don't matter, where white people are being told that we should be ashamed of who we are. And again, I think that if any of us ever learned anything in our childhood, it's you don't build yourself up by tearing other people down. There have been a lot of things that happened in this country that shouldn't have happened. But I do think we're on a path to things becoming better. But when you look at all of the things that are thrown at teenagers now, a teenager is ashamed of being who they are in some ways. And it's unfortunate because it's something that I think is really affecting the mental health of many of our children. So it's such a complex issue and so many things we can talk about. But I definitely think the change of parenting style from the strict parenting style that my parents used to use and many parents did back in the day used to this new coddling type of parenting hasn't helped young people. It hasn't helped young people grow up. It hasn't helped them become respectful. It hasn't helped them become independent. It hasn't helped them feel good about themselves. If anything, this new parenting style, which I am guilty of, has created a society where the children are weak, they're upset, they can't handle any type of adversity, and they are literally coming apart at the seams. And now this is not a failure of the children. This is a failure of the people that have raised these children. So I am not by any stretch of the imagination dumping on the children that are dealing with this right now. But as parents, as a society, we have failed them. We have failed them. And that's one of the things I think that has become something that is so obvious to me. I don't know if you all see this, but we have become a society of people that we don't really care in general about making a difference in the problems that we have in the world. It's more about publicly making it look like you give a damn without actually taking measures that have teeth that actually make a difference. And I think that's one of the big struggles that we have right now. So we've got all these children that are struggling. We've got all these adults that are struggling. And we have political organizations, we have schools, we have government, we have whatever it may be, are coming up with these measures that are supposedly intended to help the people that are struggling. But it's more about PR. It's more about getting your name in the news. It's more about making you look like you are doing something that matters than actually doing something that matters and making changes that are going to improve the whole, improve the way children are. I mean, I am really, really concerned about the young people right now. I'm concerned about the path they are on. I mean, can you imagine when all these kids get into the workplace and they have the same disrespectful attitudes that they have right now, or they have also the same fragility that they have right now when they get into those workforces? You're going to have people that are quitting left and right, people that can't handle criticism, people that can't handle the heat of deadlines and jobs and things like that. Now, I don't know. I don't know what the solutions to all these things are, but I think it's important that we all start having solutions because we keep hearing about things like, school shootings. God forbid they are tragedies. And I would never make light of anyone else's child being injured in any way. But this is simply not just a gun problem. We can eliminate every gun on the planet, but until we figure out the source, until we figure out what the reasoning is behind people picking up guns and committing mass murders on the scales that we've seen, it's never going to end. We have to get to the root cause. We have to come up with a solution to help the people that are struggling. And I'm not sure what that help means. Maybe it means they need to be in a hospital. Maybe they need to be on medication, whatever it may be. Maybe they're broken so much that they can't be in society and they need to be in prison for the rest of their lives. But we need to get to a point in our society where we're addressing the root cause, treating the root cause of all of these issues that we have in the world. If not, if we don't have guns, they'll use bombs, they'll use bow and arrows, they'll use automobiles, they'll use airplanes, they'll use knives. I mean, they'll use anything they can to complete the damage that they want to complete. So anyway, I know this podcast is a little bit over there. There's a all around, but there's a lot to talk about here. And the whole point of this was to talk about the differences I'm seeing in young people today. Despite us back in the day having very strict parents, we grew up as being pretty well-adjusted, respectful people that can dig in our heels and be gritty when we need to. I think that with this new coddling style of parenting that we've been seeing the last decade or two, you're seeing children that are weaker, that are not respectful, and that can't handle things when they get difficult. And as I was trying to tie in, when you look at the overreaching support, there are things that are there just to look good, but they really don't help. They really don't help. And I think all the different societal problems, the fighting we're having politically, the fighting that is being forced upon us to argue based on men and women, black and white, things like that. It all is creating stressors, I think, on our young people. So I don't know what the path is forward, but I do know we need to do something in this country to improve mental health. If you need a therapist, it's not easy to get one. Sometimes you have to wait months on end to get a therapist. And I mean, some people could be dead by then if they're suicidal. But I know that we need more people going into the field. We need to reevaluate, I think, parenting styles. And we also need to really start digging our heels in and coming up with solutions to really treat the problem and help the problem and prevent people that have severe issues to be out on the street causing harm to others. So I appreciate all of you tuning into the John DeVito Show tonight. This is something that's been bothering me quite a bit because I'm seeing a lot of the pain out there in the world right now. A lot of pain with children, a lot of pain with adults, a lot of pain with a lot of people. And life is too short to be this unhappy. So hopefully we can all get to a point in society where we really start focusing on what's important. And in my opinion, that's not sending money overseas, but it's actually putting America first. for once, which we never seem to do. So thank you for everybody tuning into the John DeVito Show. Hope you all have a great night, and please come back again